محمد وآل محمد صلوات. ایک اور بلند ترین صلوات. تیری جاگیر سے چل پڑا قافلہ میرے غازی کہاں ہو، اے میرے باوفا ہے بہن بیردا میرے غازی کہاں ہو، میرے غازی کہاں ہو. تجھ کو دیکھے بنا چین آتا نہیں، نوک نیزاں پہ سر تیرا ملتا نہیں. میں زیارت کروں کس طرح یہ بتا میرے غازی کہاں ہو. لاج رکھ لو بہن کی برادر میرے، خاک مقتل میرے سر کا پردہ بنے. حکم دے دو ذرا منتظر ہے ہوا میرے غازی کہاں ہو. تیرے بازو مجھے راستے میں ملے، میں نے چادر سمجھ کر وہ سر پر رکھے. بازوؤں سے تیرا پوچھتی ہوں پتا میرے غازی کہاں ہو. دیکھ کر بہن کو دشت میں ننگے سر کیا حیا آ گئی، چھپ گئے ہو کدھر، خود چلی آؤں گی تم بتا دو ذرا میرے غازی کہاں ہو. وہ تیری لاڈلی وہ سکینہ تیری چلتے ناخیس جب خاک پر گر پڑی، دیکھتی رہ گئی وہ سوئے القمہ میرے غازی کہاں ہو. میں نے بچپن میں لوری سنائی تجھے، چلنا سکھایا تھا بھائی تجھے، راہ پر خار پر مجھ کو چلنا سکھا، میرے غازی کہاں ہو، تیری جاگیر سے چل پڑا قافلہ، میرے غازی کہاں ہو، اے میرے باوفا ہے بہن بیردا، میرے غازی کہاں ہو، میرے غازی کہاں ہو، محمد وعلی محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم۔
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. آپ لوگوں کے سامنے بہت دن بعد ملاقات ہو رہی ہے اور آپ سب کو سلامت رکھیں انشاءاللہ قبلہ کی موجودگی میں۔ پڑھنے کی گنجائش نہیں ہے، ویسے کوشش کریں گے انشاءاللہ۔ درود بھیجے محمد وعلی محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم۔ اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان اللعین الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، وفوض امری الی اللہ ان اللہ بصیر بالعباد، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم، حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير، والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، وقضى ربك ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. For the love of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And for the hastening of the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. My respected scholars, elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What are our values? Keep this question in the back of your mind, inshallah we'll return to it. We're told there's a moment in time where Abu Basir comes in the presence of our sixth Imam. And he says, Yabna Rasulullah, can you please tell me what are the gunah kabira? What are the ma'asiyah kabira? What are the major sins? Now one may begin to think that the answer would be a very long list. Please pay attention very closely to the next moments because everything is built on this. This may be the most urgent issue that we're facing as a community globally. When we come forward, Abu Basir says, Yabna Rasulullah, can you please tell me what are the major sins? Gunah kabira, ma'siyah kabira. There's a long discussion amongst the ulama on this. This is one tradition from the Imam alayhi salam. I'm reading directly from the Risala of Sayyid Sistani. At that point in time, the Imam alayhi salam responds, he says, Abu Basir, note there are 7. Don't forget these. Note them down, 7. So, Ya ibn Rasulullah, what are they? He says, number 1, committing shirk. To associate anyone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, major sin. Now the scholars have had debated on this. Does shirk meaning creating another God equivalent to Allah? Does shirk have to be a person? Does shirk have to be an idol? Or can shirk be an ideology? Is it possible for me to equate an ideology with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Rather, is it possible for me to equate certain materialism, capitalism, other forms to equate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is a debate amongst the scholars. Number 1, Abu Basir, note, the Imam says, the first gunah kabira, ma'siyah kabira in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, canonical sins which won't be forgiven. He says it's to commit shirk, to associate anyone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, what else? He says to kill an innocent person. You kill any innocent person who has done nothing wrong. You know, go tell the people of ISIS and Daesh and the likes. Have they read the teachings? They haven't read the teachings because they've separated the Quran from the Itra, from the Ahlul Bayt. And this is what happens when you separate the Ahlul Bayt from the Quran. You don't understand what the Quran is actually saying. Therefore, the Imam says, to kill any innocent person, major sin in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, what else? Furthermore, he says to accuse an innocent woman of indecency. He says, what else? To run away from the battlefield of jihad, number 4. To run away from the Maidan of jihad. Major sin in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The minor struggle. He says, what else? To deal with usury. Riba. Usury, exorbitant amounts of interest. The scholars have debated on this issue. Is riba interest? Many have said no. Riba is actually exorbitant amounts, like loan sharking. This is what the Meccans used to do before Rasulullah. They would say, you know, for in our modern terms, 30, 40, 50% on the loan. The argument came forward that riba, usury, exorbitant amounts, to the extent that Sayyid Munir al-Khabaz, who's one of our major scholars of these days, of khatibs in the Arab world, he writes in his book on Sahib al-Zaman, he quotes from Shaheed al-Sadr. Shaheed al-Sadr, may Allah bless him, he was the scholar who many of our scholars today, out of respect, they say if he was alive, they would not declare their marja'iyah, out of respect of him. He said that looking at capitalism, he studied capitalism, then he studied communism, and then he shared what Islam says, and he wrote a very famous book called Iqtisaduna, Our Economics. And in this he details this concept. And he says that in my belief, in my view, that a flat rate of interest is acceptable. That was his view. Many scholars differed, and many scholars disagreed. They said that we don't accept this. But that was his view. This is for the scholars to debate. But this, the Imam is saying riba, which is clear. It is not 5 or 6% or 7%, because many youth who come and study economics and finance in America, they will say, hold on, 1 second. I'm taught the time value of money. That if I give someone $100 today, and I give them $100 to next year, $100 back, I didn't give them the same amount of money. Because there's opportunity costs and the like. I gave them maybe $94, maybe $93. Therefore, this is talking about exorbitant amounts, which leads to financial slavery. The Imam saying, riba not accepted. Major sin in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Yabna Rasulullah, what else? He says to steal the property of an orphan, number 6. To usurp the property of an orphan, someone who has lost their parents, to usurp that, major sin in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Yabna Rasulullah, what else? He says to disrespect one's parents. Number 7, to disrespect one's parents. Major sin in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, anything else? He says, yes. Ta'arrub ba'da al-hijra. Ya ibn Rasulullah, what is this concept? He says, allow me to explain. At that point in time, Abu Basir was very diligent. He had some ma'rif of the Imam. He says, Yabna Rasulullah, you said that there are 7, I counted 8. How? Because the Imam doesn't make a mistake. And everything that the Imam says or does has a hujjah. He says, very well. He says, Abu Basir, the reason is that ta'arrub ba'd al-hijra and shirk are one and the same. There's no difference. So what is this concept of ta'arrub ba'd al-hijra? And how does it relate to you and I as mu'mineen in the modern era, in the modern world? This is what I want to look at in the next few nights. And I also want to look at how it is and what is it that are our values as a community. Because when we look at our community, we have to start planning. If I want to build a business, if I want to build an institution, if I want to build anything that is going to stand the test of time, I must plan for it. You look at companies like Amazon today, Microsoft, you look at Apple, they have very long time frames. For example, Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, he comes forward and says, I don't know after the divorce he is or not, I don't know, nonetheless. This idea, he comes forward and says that we make a 100-year plan. That whatever we're going to do with Amazon, we're going to look in a 100-year frame. Even small decisions, Jeff Bezos says, 7-year plan. Under that, we don't look at it. But why is it when we come to our madrasas, our Husainiyas, our Imam Bargahs, we don't have these plans? Do I know what my community will be like 10 years down the road? 50 years down the road? I'm talking globally, huh? Sometimes we don't even know what's going to happen this Muharram. And I don't blame anyone, by the way. This is not something to play the blame game here. The idea is many people have responsibilities. Many people who are running our communities are doing a full-time job on a part-time basis. There's a lot of responsibility. But if we want our religion to thrive in the future, we need to make sure that we establish some things fundamentally. And my suggestion, and my humble suggestion, is to look at two things very closely, which the Ahlul Bayt told us. The Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. These are our compass throughout life. Therefore, I want to look at this question of values. What are our values in the modern era? One way to look at this, another way of looking at this is, you tell me what your priorities are, I will tell you what your values are. The idea being that if something is important in my life, I make time for it. If something's important in my life, I make time for it. If work is important, I make time for it. If family is important, I make time for it. But why is it, and I'm talking globally, I'm talking about my travels from the UK to Canada to America. It seems that religion for many people throughout the year becomes back burner issues. It's something that if I have time. Whereas the argument that you will begin to notice is that if you make religion a priority in your life, you will get benefits not only in this dunya, not only in the akhirah, but also in this dunya. And I will share those in the subsequent nights. One value that I want to discuss as we get started on this discussion of what is it that this ta'arub ba'd al-hijrah is. The Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam has shed some light on this, and our scholars have shed some light. So therefore, I want to look at what is this concept, why is it pertinent to us as followers of the Ahlul Bayt living in the West? What are its exemptions that the scholars have outlined so that we can know them in our lives? Are there exemptions, or is it a blanket statement about what it is? And furthermore, how did the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam show us how to implement this in our lives? And how can this be one of the most important things in our lives? And how can we learn from the life of Sayyid al-Shuhada and what he taught us to implement in our lives? And what values he said was priority for us, inshallah. This is what we hope to discuss in the next few moments. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. According to Sayyid Sistani, please refer to your marja on these issues. I don't normally discuss any fiqh issues. The only reason I'm discussing this is directly from the Risala, number one. Number two, it has a very, very big social implication. This has a tremendous social implication. He says it's to leave a nation or a place where you are allowed to practice your faith in a way where you go to another place, another country, another region, where you are no longer practicing your faith in a way that you are no longer adhering to your wajibat and you are no longer refraining from your muharramat. So for example, if I lived in a place where I was able to practice my faith, I was able to pray, I was able to fast, I was able to do everything Islam allows. Then I migrate, then I move to a place where I'm no longer able to practice, where I'm no longer able to keep my deen. I used to pray before, I don't pray anymore. I used to stay away from alcohol, I don't stay away from alcohol anymore. For example, I used to do everything that Islam required, I no longer do it. That would be a migration that Islam is against. Now we know, Rasulullah himself migrated. Rasulullah migrated from Mecca to Medina, for example, very famous migration. The Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam migrated as well. So it can't be that all migration is bad. But there's a particular type that Islam has said you have to be careful about. And this is what Islam is shedding light on. Why? Because the Ahlul Bayt have said, what is the most important, what's the most valuable thing that we possess? The most valuable thing that you and I possess is not our property, it's not our house, it's not those material possessions. The most important and most valuable thing that you and I possess is our love of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. There's nothing more valuable. The most valuable thing is because that is the spring of all the good that we do in our lives. And you will find, if you read the history of Tashayyu', if you read the history of Shi'ism, you will realize what prices have been paid in order for this deen, this madhab, this love of the Ahlul Bayt to get to you and I today. It was not easy. It was a tremendous price. If you read the history of Baghdad, there was a time in the history of Baghdad that they would not erect a wall, they would not build a wall until they drained the blood of a Sayyid Hassani in the cement. You and I, when we build a building, we mix water with the cement. They were saying that we're going to take the blood of the Sadat and drain that into the cement so that we can build the walls. This was the level and this was the extent of the animosity towards the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. You go further, there were times where they would not even build the building until they took one side of the wall, the other side of the wall, and closed a living Sadat in the middle of the wall. Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire is not that long ago, huh? Right now, the hegemony of the world, the leading world power is the United States. Before that it was England, Great Britain. Before that it was the Ottoman Empire. It's maybe China in a few days, I don't know, we'll find out. But nonetheless, when you look at the history of the Ottomans, they were rulers who had animosity towards the Ahlul Bayt. Whether it was the ruler Salim, whether it was the ruler Murad. At one moment in time in the history, if you read the history of the Ottomans, they ordered 70,000 Shias to be wrangled up, to be brought together. 40,000 of them in one day were beheaded. 30,000 imprisoned. How did Sadat end up in different places? If you read the history of Shias, how did Sadat end up, for example, Sayyids who claim lineage from the Ahlul Bayt? How did Shias, for example, end up? How did people who were Shias, how did they end up in other places? How did they end up in Persia? Before the Safavid Empire, Persia was all Sunni. How did Shias end up there? The Safavid Empire, they changed it. Nonetheless, how did Sadat end up in remote locations? In, for example, Persia. In, for example, Uzbekistan. Have you ever seen a Bukhari? Someone who has Bukhari in their last name? That's someone whose ancestry was in Uzbekistan, modern day Uzbekistan. How did this happen? This happened because there was a migration. People were being killed left, right, and centers, followers of the Ahlul Bayt, especially those who were from the household of the Ahlul Bayt. They said, we must protect our deen, we must protect our mazhab, we must protect our love of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Therefore, what did they do? They migrated in the middle of the night. And when they migrated in the middle of the night, what did they take with them? Did they take their property? Did they take their money? Did they take... No. Historians said they took two things. They took their books of Aqidah in their hands, and they took their love of the Ahlul Bayt in their hearts. It would be a travesty. It would be a very, very dangerous and very tragic thing if we come forward in our modern world and we have our next generation saying that, Islam, I don't have time for the masjid. I don't have time for the Husayniyah. I don't have time for the Imam Bargah. When you say this, do you realize the price that has been paid in history? For you and I to get this, we got it on a silver platter. You know, we, alhamdulillah, and many people are going for the Arba'in, inshallah. May Allah all grant us the ability to go for Arba'in, inshallah, of Sayyid al-Shuhada. We go very easily today. Not very long ago, many will remember the Ba'athist regime and how difficult it was at that time to go. You know, there was history has narrated, there were times where people would pay hands as prices to go for ziyarah. There was a lady, she went to the border, she was going, this is in the time of the 11th Imam, we're told. The Abbasid Khulafa, some of them were ashqal ashqiya, the worst of the worst. She wanted to go for ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. She went to the border. She had covered herself. They said, oh lady, you want to go for the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada? You know the price. The price is your hand. Move your hand forward. Your right hand, move your hand forward. Your left hand, for example. Put your left hand forward. She put her right hand forward. Said, I told you, put your left hand forward. Why are you putting your right hand forward? She said, you already took my left hand last year. This is all I have left. This is the price that people have paid for Iman. Therefore, ta'arrub ba'd al-hijrah, according to Sayyid Sistani, is this idea that I leave from one nation, go to another nation, and I no longer am practicing. I've left my faith. I've left my belief system. We're told there's an exemption to this idea though, the scholars say. And by the way, what's very important here is, this is an individualistic decision that every person needs to make. So for example, if there's a family of 4, let's take this very simple example. If there's a family of 4, husband, wife, 2 children. Let's make it easy, everyone's over 15. Everyone's baligh, aqil, alhamdulillah. The husband says, I feel like I can make this migration from a Muslim land to a non-Muslim land, and my aqidah, my belief system, nothing will happen. I'm confident. The wife says, I also feel confident. I feel okay, no problem. Furthermore, the daughter says, I feel confident as well. I will keep my iman, my aqidah. The son says, I'm not sure. I'm kind of iffy. I'm not sure. According to the rule, that son is supposed to stay back. This is the price of keeping your iman and your deen, your belief system. It's not something that you can take very lightly. You have to be very cognizant about what's going to happen in the future. The idea is why? Why did the Imam say Ta'arruf ba'd al-Hijra and shirk is the same, one and the same? Because shirk is not necessarily just to take an idol and say this idol is equivalent to God. I may take an ideology. I may say that my wealth is more important than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One form of shirk. I may say that, for example, my property is more important than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I may say my children are more important than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So on and so forth. By the way, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam have given us an exception on this matter, which is very important to note. The exception is if your life is on the line. If someone's life is on the line, they are allowed to migrate, even if there's a threat of losing the faith. For example, our brothers in Iraq, our brothers in Pakistan, for example, the community in Pakistan, target killing. This is a real problem. I myself have shuhada in my family. You must have many in your family as well. The Iraqi community every day. Lebanon, people have lost family members. Throughout the Shia world, you will find people losing their life. In that situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Ahlul Bayt have told us, you can migrate. But to the extent that it saves your life, not more than that. What's an example of this? Many of our scholars, for example, Sayyid Sistani and many others, when they get ill, for example, they have cardiovascular issues, heart disease, they come to London for treatment. When they come to London, are they saying, where's, for example, where's downtown? I want to see the Zone 1. What's going on in London? Where's Big Ben? Where's the Parliament building? Or are they going to, I want to hop over and go to Champs-Élysées. I want to go to see the Eiffel Tower? No. By the way, I'm not saying, Quran says, قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, go and see the land. No, I'm not saying don't go on vacation. What I'm saying is very delicate here. They get their treatment and they go straight back. Another example, some scholars say, is the example of Sayyid Khomeini, when he was in exile. You'll remember when he was in exile, where was he exiled to first? Turkey. Then? Iraq. 13 years in Iraq. Then Iraq, after Iraq, where? Paris. Maybe Kuwait, I'm not sure, perhaps. But I know he went to Paris for sure. In Paris, was he saying, where's the Eiffel Tower? Where's Champs-Élysées? I want to do some shopping. The idea was that he was there because it was something that was a maslaha. It was something he had to do. Therefore, he would come out of the house once a day and give a statement to the press. And then he would go back. The idea was that you must, if you feel that the environment is going to impact you, you need to be cautious. But there's another point that I want to elaborate on here very quickly. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. A beautiful tradition that will alleviate all your problems here, inshallah. The Ahlul Bayt have given a beautiful solution here. Hamad al-Sindi was a companion of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, of the 6th Imam. Hamad was a businessman. He was a merchant. Hamad would travel from Medina. He would go to, for example, Rome. He would go to Byzantine, the Byzantine Empire. There were not Muslims at that time. There were no Muslims there. At that time, Hamad, he had a dilemma. This merchant, this businessman, Hamad al-Sindi, he would go and do business, and when he would come back to Medina, all the Muslims would say, Hamad, you go so much to these non-Muslim lands. You go so much to Rome. One day you're going to die. And when you die, you're going to be raised on Yawm al-Qiyamah on the Day of Judgment with non-Muslims. So they would make fun of him. Some people say they would call him the Roman or the Byzantine. At that point in time, when Hamad came back one day, he went straight to the 6th Imam. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, I do business, and then I come back. When I come back, the Muslims make fun of me. When they make fun of me, can you please tell me, what they're saying true? Because if it's true, then I won't do it. And if it's not true, then at least my heart won't hurt. The Imam asked him a question. He said, Hamad, can you tell me something? He said, Yabna Rasulullah, what is it? He says, when you go to these non-Muslim lands, when you go to Rome, when you go to the Byzantine Empire, do you tell people about us? Do you tell people about the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? About the Quran? About Islam? He said, Yabna Rasulullah, yes, I tell them. I tell them about you, I tell them about the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, I tell them about the Quran, I tell them about Islam, I tell them about Rasulullah. He says, how about when you're in Medina? How about when you're in this town? In our city? He said, Yabna Rasulullah, I don't tell them. Perhaps they're all Muslims, maybe he didn't feel the need. At that point in time, the Imam looked at Hamad. He said, Hamad, know that if this is the case and you die in those lands, in the Byzantine Empire, in Rome, in your state of travel, and you die there, you will be raised on Yawmul Qiyamah as a ummah by yourself. There will be nur in front of you. This gives us a principle that as long as we are in the West or anywhere for that matter, and we are raising the zikr of Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, this is a good migration. And if we are not raising the zikr of Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, then this is something we must correct. And what's beautiful about this is we can always correct our sail. At one point in time, my ship is going in one direction. I turn the sail, I can always go in the right direction. It's not very difficult, it's not very complex, it's not very complicated. You and I need to figure out what our priorities are. I tell myself first and foremost, what are our priorities? I know in my travels, I've met people, they drive their children 4 hours one way to madrasa, Sunday school on Sundays. One way. Other way, 4 more, 8. They know the priorities. They know this is not something the child's going to get by themselves. You have to put effort. And then there's others who may be close and they aren't able to go. What are our priorities? Because the most valuable thing that you and I have is our love of the Ahlul Bayt. This is going to be our thesis for the next few nights. Sometimes when you get something on a silver platter, you don't value it. You don't realize how important it is. It is Shab Jum'ah. I want to just say a few lines. With respect to the responsibility of our values, what are our values? Because we must pass these values on to our next generations. And the values must be from the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. It cannot just be my values and what I pick to be good for my idea. For example, someone may come forward and say, oh, I value, for example, purely wealth. If we have time and life permits, I'll talk about the concept of wealth in Islam. It's not what you think. Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, if you look at their history, whether it was Amir al-Mu'mineen or Imam Sajjad or Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, they were actually very wealthy, they were very affluent. But what they did with their wealth was very different than what you and I may be doing or may be thinking. We have Sahih traditions from Usul al-Kafi on authority. Usul al-Kafi is one of our canonical 4 books of hadith. Usul al-Kafi, Man la yahdharu al-faqih, tahzeeb and istabsar. These are 4 solid books of ours, according to our scholars. In that, there's a bab of economics within that. Talking about iqtisad and mercantile affairs. We have on tradition, you know the 25 years that Amir al-Mu'mineen was sitting at home, we say he was sitting at home. Do you know what he was doing? He was developing property. He was developing land. He was developing orchards for dates. Do you know what he did with that money though? It is clear in Usul al-Kafi, he used that money to free over 1,000 slaves. That was not cheap at that time. That Amir al-Mu'mineen, he never, as his income increased, he didn't change his standard of living. He changed his standard of giving. He began to give and give more. That Ali ibn Abi Talib was still the one who was patching his shoe and patching his clothes. And when his sandals gave out, when his clothing gave out, he says, oh Allah, bear witness that this sandal, these clothings, they gave up on me. I didn't give up on them. I would have kept wearing them if they kept going. This is Amir al-Mu'mineen. Allahu Akbar. This personality, the French historian says, I am perplexed by Ali ibn Abi Talib. I have never seen anyone in history who is the greatest warrior of his time and the greatest scholar of his time. I've never seen it. Madharul ajaib. He is the culmination of strange traits. That one, would you expect that Einstein at the same time is the greatest general and army warrior? You wouldn't expect. Amir al-Mu'mineen is the culmination of all of these, embodiment of all of these traits. There is a tradition I want to share with you with respect to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Ayatollah Bahjat, many of you will remember Ayatollah Bahjat. He passed away about roughly 10 years ago. Big Arif. He says this is that tradition which doesn't even need a sanad. It does not need a chain of narrators. It does not need evidence. Why? Because it is written over the dome of where Amir al-Mu'mineen is resting. Where Amir al-Mu'mineen is sleeping in Najaf, it's written there. He says that it is authentic that the hadith says, Ayatollah Bahjat says, that if all of mankind united on the love of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never have created the hellfire. Allah would never have created the hellfire if everyone had united in their love of Ali ibn Abi Talib. No one can understand the personality, but our goal as a community, as leaders of the community, as everyone who's planning for the next generation, is to make sure we pass that love of Ali ibn Abi Talib in our hearts to our next generation. The same way we got it. And it came at a big price. We need to make sure we pass that on to the next generation. Because what's the point otherwise? I've heard it with my own ears, about people leaving this path. There's a drift in society. The whole idea of Ta'arub Ba'd al-Hijrah was the Ahlul Bayt said, your environment has an impact on you, whether you realize it or not. Whether you realize it or not, your environment will have an impact. Therefore, in the few moments that we have for Shab Jum'ah, one of the things that is very important that we need to pass on to the next generation is the importance of Shab Jum'ah. The importance of Thursday night programs. If you go to other parts of the world, particularly Muslim lands, followers of the Ahlul Bayt in particular, Shab Jum'ah, it used to be a big deal. People would make time. They would make time for Dua Kumal, for Salah, for Namaz, for Dua Kumal, for all of these things. But when you go across our globe, especially in the West, in the UK, in Canada, and the United States, the numbers are diminishing with a few exceptions. Maybe one or two communities here and there, but generally the numbers are dwindling. They're falling. We need to figure out what our priorities are. One of the aspects of Shab Jum'ah was to remember our marhumeen, the people we've lost, our loved ones, our parents, our grandparents, our loved ones. You know, we have in tradition that they come on Thursday nights asking and seeing what has been sent for them. For example, in the purgatory, what we call purgatory, that time of that space between Yawm al-Qiyamah and death, Barzakh. They look for something and they see other people who've gotten something. Thursday night is the best time to give that. But if people don't have the values and the respect of the parents, then how is that going to happen? The verse that I recited at the beginning of Surah 17, verse number 23, a part of it. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَن لَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Quran. That I command you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that I command that you do not associate anyone and you do not worship anyone except me. And then the ayah continues, and do good to your parents. The people, the mufassirin of the Quran look at this verse and they say it's a very interesting verse. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا? Why did he say right away in one breath? It is as if, the scholars are saying, it is as if they are saying, that Allah is saying, that I am not allowing you to worship anyone except me. But if I allowed you to worship anyone else, it would be your parents. This is the level that the Ahlul Bayt and Islam has told us about our parents. But these values are slipping in our society. These values, if they slip, we slip as a society. We're told there's a moment in time in our history, Musa alayhi salam, he goes to Allah, Kalimullah. Musa had the ability to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Musa comes forward. He says, my Lord, my Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I have a request. What's the request? Musa. Musa says, I want to see who's my neighbor in Jannah. Who's my neighbor in paradise. At that point in time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Musa, very well. He says, go to this bazaar, go to this location, go to this area. Musa puts it in his GPS. He goes, in my terms, not in the riwayah. He goes, he gets there. When he gets to the bazaar, he goes to a particular store. It's a butcher. He gets there. When he gets to the butcher shop, he's like, am I at the right address? Address changed, wrong place. What's going on? It's a butcher. He's cutting meat. He's selling meat. He is my neighbor. I'm a prophet and not an ordinary prophet. He stays for a little while. And he stays at the shop. When he stays at the shop, he notices even the way he's dealing with the people. The butcher is not the best. He's just like, here, take this, go. Musa said, Allah doesn't make mistakes. I know this. I am at the right location. He stayed. After, when the sun set, when he was beginning to close up the shop, the butcher, he began to go home. Musa said, I'll follow him home. When Musa said, I'll follow him home, he began to follow him. And sometimes, you get the feeling someone's following you. He looked back. The butcher, he looks back. When he looked back, Musa saw him. Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam. Musa says, will you have a guest in your house tonight? Will you have somebody to be your guest? In the old times, they used to accept guests on a moment's notice. Nowadays, if someone gives you a week notice, but there was rights of the guest in Islam. And the guest brings barakah in your life. This is something that Islam taught. Musa alayhi salam says, will you have a guest? The butcher says, very well, I'll have a guest. Come on. He follows him to the house. When they get to the house, the butcher says, can you please have a seat for a moment? Can you sit down for a moment? He says, sure. Musa's watching all of this. The butcher goes to the kitchen. When he goes to the kitchen, he begins to cook a meal. It's some soup. He cooks this meal and he puts out 3 bowls. Musa's thinking, there's 2 people here. Puts out 3 bowls. He puts the soup in one of them and he begins to put pieces of bread. He breaks the pieces of bread and he puts those pieces of bread into the soup bowl. Musa's watching all of this. He then takes the soup bowl and then he goes up the stairs in his house. It's a loft area. When he goes up the stairs, he takes a big basket, what we would call a big basket type of thing, and he brings it down the stairs. Musa's watching this. He brings it down the stairs. When he brings it down the stairs, he begins to take the bowl in his hands and he takes the pieces of bread and he begins to pass those pieces of bread into the basket. Musa's watching this. He can't see what's inside the basket. After a moment in time, once this butcher is putting the pieces of bread into the basket, after a moment he hears a whisper from the basket. When he hears a whisper from the basket, at that point in time, Musa notices the butcher puts his ear close to the basket. And then he moves his ear away. When he moves his ear away, he smiles. The butcher smiles. Musa alayhi salam's watching all of this. When he's watching all of this, after some time, when the bowl is empty, this butcher takes the entire big basket and he goes and he puts it back up in the loft area. He comes back down. When he comes back down, he takes the 2 bowls and he puts 1 bowl in front of Musa, 1 bowl in front of himself. And then he begins to have a conversation. At that time, Musa alayhi salam, he has a conversation with the butcher. The butcher says that, what is it that at this moment, can you please forgive me? I had to attend to something. I'm sorry, you're my guest. I will spend time with you now. Musa says, hold on. Can you please tell me, what did I see? What did I just witness? The butcher says, what happened? He said, you cooked some soup. Then you put out 3 bowls. You took 1 bowl, you put bread in it. And then you went and took something from the loft area and brought it down. And then you began to have a sort of a discussion there. What happened? Oh. He said, oh, you want to know about this? He said, in this basket, what you're calling a basket, lives my mother. I'm all she has in the world. I look after her. Musa says, really? He said, yes. He says, can I ask you about that moment when you were taking pieces of the bread and putting it towards the basket? She was eating it? He said, yes. He said, but then there was one moment where you put your ear close to the basket. You leaned in. And I heard a whisper, but I couldn't tell what happened. The butcher said, don't ask about this. Don't worry about this. This is a joke between me and her. It's a joke. He said, what's the joke? Tell me. I want to know. He said, it's a joke. He said, every time I do this, every time I come home, I make this soup, I make this bread, and I feed my mother. When I'm finishing up feeding my mother, she asks me to come near her. I come near her. And then she begins to give me a dua, a prayer. Musa said, what's the prayer? The butcher says that my mother prays to me and she says, my son, may Allah make you Musa's neighbor in Jannah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Musa looked right back at him. He said, do not take this dua of your mother lightly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has accepted your dua. Allah told me that you are my neighbor in Jannah. I am Musa. Allahu Akbar. The Ahlul Bayt have told us, we don't realize sometimes the key of rahmah that is in our house in the face of our parents. Allahu Akbar. We're told there's a moment in time a man comes to Rasulullah, he comes to the Holy Prophet. Rasul al-Azam is at that level, that he is at the highest level of tawassul. ثُمَّ دَنَا فَتَضَلَّ فَكَانَ قَابَ قَوْسَيْنَ أَوْ أَدْنَى. The Quran says that he got so close to the point that he was 2 bows or less distance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sidratul Muntaha, where Jibreel could not. You remember Mi'raj? Mi'raj, Rasulullah got as close in proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that anyone can imagine. The height of tawassul is Rasulullah. Do you know why he said 2 bows? قَابَ قَوْسَيْنَ أَوْ أَدْنَى. Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi says, Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi is not Shia, but Ayatullah Wahid al-Khurasani says, if you take all of the ulama of Ahl Sunnah and put them on one side of the scale, and you put Fakhruddin al-Razi, Sahib al-Tafsir al-Kabir, on the other side, Fakhruddin al-Razi has more knowledge than all of them combined. This Fakhruddin al-Razi says, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use Qaba Qawsayn aw Adna, 2 bows or less distance for Rasulullah? Saying, why that analogy? هَذَا بُرِدَ عَلَى اسْتِعْمَالِ الْعَرَبِ وَعَرْضِهِمْ. He says, Fakhruddin al-Razi says, because this is what the Arabs used to do before Islam in Ayyam Jahiliyyah. What happened? If 2 tribe leaders wanted to come forward and they wanted to declare their peace, they wanted to declare their unity, they wanted to declare that they are together, they would take 2 bows and put them together, and they would take 1 arrow and shoot it, indicating that your war is my war, your peace is my peace. The tribe leader of tribe A and tribe B would come together. Therefore, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Qaba Qawsayn aw Adna, 2 bows or less, because Allah was saying, O Muhammad, your war is my war, your peace is my peace. This is the Rasulullah. This Rasulullah, a man comes to Rasulullah and says, Ya Rasulullah, I am in need, I have a hajat, I need some help, can you please do dua for me? Allahu Akbar. Rasulullah, he doesn't even finish the dua, it's accepted. Do you know what Rasulullah said to him? Rasulullah said, go to your parents. Allahu Akbar. Rasulullah said, go to your parents, ask them to do dua for you. He says, go to your mother. Rasulullah says, go to your mother. He says, Ya Rasulullah, my mother is deceased. She's died. She's passed away. He says, go to your father. He says, very well. He goes to his father. When he goes towards his father, Rasulullah looks at his companions and he says, I wish his mother was alive because his dua would be accepted faster. Meaning there's levels. But he said the fathers will be accepted as well. Allahu Akbar. Furthermore, we're told there's a moment in time a man comes to Rasulullah. He says, Ya Rasulullah, can you please pray for me? Can you please do dua for me? He says, go ask your parents. Go ask your mother. He says, Ya Rasulullah, my mother's deceased. She's passed away. He says, go ask your father. He says, Ya Rasulullah, he's deceased. Rasulullah says, go to their grave. He says, Ya Rasulullah, it's very far. It's not like today. I jump on a plane, jump on a train, jump in my car and go. No, he said, very far. I can't go. Rasulullah said, very well, go to the graveyard, the cemetery in the city, and I want you to make 2 graves in the sand and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the wasila of my parents, grant me this hajj. Allahu Akbar. Do you know the level? Do I know? Do we know? This Shabeer Jum'ah is a time to remember our parents and our grandparents, our loved ones. We sometimes don't know. Ayatullah Sheikh Murtaza al-Ansari, one of our great scholars. He's buried in the Haram of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Najaf. Roughly 150 years ago he lived. You know, many people, they follow his template out of Maraji. When they write their Risala, they follow his template. The structure that he established, they follow that. Sheikh Murtaza al-Ansari. How big of a scholar this is. If ever it says in our books, قال الشيخ, that the Sheikh said, if it doesn't say who's the Sheikh, it's understood it's Sheikh Ansari. He's also the one who started the stipend system for the Hawza students. You know, before, the Hawza students, not only did they have to study, they also have to work in the bazaar. They would be locksmiths and things like this. Sheikh Murtaza said, how is it possible that someone has to study all this and also work? We must give them a stipend. Like in a PhD program. You get a stipend if you're doing it full time, for example. This was Sheikh Murtaza al-Ansari. When Sheikh Murtaza al-Ansari's mother passed away, he cried so much that he stopped giving his dars. He didn't teach anymore. His students came to him. They said, Sheikh Murtaza, you are our teacher. We learn from you. We know that your mother has died. You're close to your mother, but death is going to happen to everyone. Death is inevitable. We're all going to die. Why are you crying so much? We learn sabr and patience from you. Sheikh Murtaza says, he looked back at them and he became upset. He says that I am not crying because she has died, because I know everyone will die. I am crying, and your question shows me that you have not understood the position of mothers and parents in Islam. Sheikh Murtaza says, I am not crying because she's died. I am crying because that door, that bab of rahmah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had for me on this planet has closed today. It's closed now. I was getting so much mercy from this woman. I was getting so much help from her. Her du'as. I say this because somebody may come forward, and I live in a modern society, I live in a Western society where, these things are stories. How do I tell this to my colleague at work? How do I tell this to someone else? Remember Abraham Lincoln? 15th President of the United States during the Civil War? He has a very famous quote. He said, I never forgot my mother's prayers. They always stuck with me wherever I went. We sometimes think that this idea is something foreign. We should remind our friends. We should remind the Christian, the Hindu, the Jewish person, everyone. Even if they don't have a faith, there are responsibilities to those who are our parents. If you don't accept, I'll give you what philosophers say. Philosophy is not a religion, right? Philosophy is a subject. Socrates, Aflatun, Aristotle. 3 big philosophers. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Plato said, because somebody may say, I don't believe in religion, you need to give me another dalil. Plato says, Aflatun says, that a man must repay the first, the oldest, and the greatest debt. What debt is that? What repayment is that? He said that is the repayment to the parents. He says he must repay them in 3 ways. Which ways? Aflatun says. In which ways? He must repay them with property, because they gave him shelter. He must repay them with his life. That means that with his body. That is, for example, if they need help with groceries, you must help. If they need help with something else, you must help. And he says the third, with your life. So what do you mean? He expands on this. What does that mean? He says that sometimes, for example, when they become alone, when they become lonely, they need someone to talk to. Nowadays what's become people don't have time anymore. Aflatun saying, make time. Arastu, his student, Aflatun's student. You may say, where am I saying all these things? In the Hawza, many of my colleagues have told me they teach Aristotelian logic. In fact, some scholars think it's possible that one of the prophets, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says 124,000 prophets He sent. It's possible that there was a prophet for China. We don't know. There must have been 1 billion people. There must have been a prophet for India. 1 billion people. Some have said that it's possible that one of the prophets of Allah is Aristotle. That's a debate among scholars. I will not give my verdict. I have no jurisdiction here. But they've said that his teachings seem like it's possible. This Aristotle says that a man should first go hungry before he sees his parents going hungry, because he owes them that debt. In Judaism, somebody may say, this is just Islam. No, it's a universal principle. In Judaism, in the Old Testament, and also the Christians believe this as well, as part of the Old Testament, the 10 Commandments, one of the 10 Commandments is honor thy parents. When this commandment came to Moses, to Musa alayhi salam, Banu Israel gave a hard time. They said, Musa, Moses, we have a problem. We have a dilemma. He said, what's the dilemma? He says that your God says that honor thy parents. But we live in the era and the territory of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh tells us, if the Pharaoh says something and our parents say something and it contradicts one another, who do we listen to? We need clarification on this matter. I think this is not the right rule. That's what they said. Musa goes back to the mount. When he goes back to the mount, he comes back. When he comes back down, they think that maybe he changed the rule. Maybe Allah changed his mind. God doubles down in the Old Testament. He says, honor thy parents, without whom you would not exist. What are you talking about, the Pharaoh? You would not exist without them. In the Judeo-Christian narrative, in Hinduism, 1 billion, 1.2, 1.3 billion people on the planet. In their belief system, perspective. Ganesha, they have one of their gods. It's called Ganesha. He's having a dialogue with his brother. His brother was a very big, athletic, strong guy. And he was just a normal. He says, who can go around the world faster? Let's race. The two brothers have a discussion. When they're having a discussion, they're saying who can go around faster. The one of them says, I will go around faster. The strong, big, athletic one, he goes around Earth 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. He goes around the Earth. When he gets back to Earth, he sees his brother, Ganesha. He sees his brother there. When he sees his brother there, next to his brother are his parents standing there. Their parents standing there. The big, athletic, strong one says, I won. I won. I went around the world 3 times. You're still here. Ganesha says, no, I won. He says, how? He says, while you were going around the world 3 times, 1, 2, 3, I went around our parents 3 times. You went around the world. I went around my world. What's more important? The idea being that perspective is very important. Within Judeo-Christian narrative, within Hinduism, within philosophy, even if you don't believe in religion, the idea that one must pay respect to their parents is vital. Vital. And if you do that, imagine what position you can get in the court of the Ahlul Bayt. Ibrahim, Sayyid Ibrahim al-Mujab. Never forget the name. He is buried in the grave of Imam al-Hussein, in the haram of Imam al-Hussein. When he would go to the Zarih of Sayyid al-Shuhada, when we go to the Zarih, may Allah grant us all the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, inshallah. When you get there, you say, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Peace and salutations be upon you, O Aba Abdullah. This is what we say. Allahu Akbar, Ibrahim al-Mujab. But when you say salam, the response is wajib. As you know, better than I do. When someone says salam, to say salam is not wajib, but the response is wajib. At that point in time, everyone says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. We are getting the response, but we're not able to hear it. Ibrahim, Sayyid Ibrahim al-Mujab, when he would go to the shrine, he would say, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. And people would hear, Wa alaykum as-salam ya Ibrahim, from the Zarih of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Allahu Akbar. What happened? What was the story? How did he get this level, this manzilat? How did he get it? We're told there's a moment in time, Sayyid Ibrahim says, I would take my father and my mother to the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Every week I would alternate. 1 week I would take my mother, 1 week I would take my father. 1 week mother, 1 week father. Because I had one mule and I had myself, and I was not able to take both at the same time. He said he was able to take one, not both. Nonetheless, when this happened, one day it was the turn to take his father for ziyarah to Sayyid al-Shuhada. It was many kilometers away from their house. At that same day, the mother said, my son, I wish that you take me for ziyarah this week. Sayyid says at that point in time, he says, hold on, 1 second. But mother, you know that this is my father's turn. How can I stop that? It's his turn. I'll take you next week, inshallah. At that point in time, she says, but what if I don't live till next week? Sayyid Ibrahim goes to the father. He goes to his father. He says, my father, I know it's your turn. I know this is your turn for ziyarah. But is it possible that today, maybe just today, you can skip your turn so I can take my mother? She really wants to go. He says that, but what if I don't make it till next week? And they're going back and forth, back and forth. What if I don't make it? Sayyid Ibrahim says, very well, I will take them both today. At that point in time, he took his father and his mother. The tradition says that he tied his mother on his back using a cloth. He tied his mother on his back, and he took his father in his arms. And he began to go to the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And he kept going and kept going until the tradition says there was a tornado that came, a sandstorm that came. That sandstorm began to move dust. He says, my sandals broke, my tiredness, and I became exhausted. I just did one dua to Sayyid al-Shuhada Abdullah al-Hussein. I said, Sayyid al-Shuhada, let me get my parents to your haram, your rawdah. Allahu Akbar. Sayyid says, I don't know how the strength of Sayyid al-Shuhada allowed me to get to the haram. When I got to the haram, Sayyid Ibrahim says, when I got to the haram, as soon as I got there, I made a thought to myself that I will sit down here for 2 minutes so that I can gather my breath, so I can gather my strength, and then I will go for my ziyarah. He says, I thought about that, but as soon as I thought about that, I stopped. And when I stopped, at that moment, I thought to myself, my parents have been mustarib. They have been wanting to go for ziyarah. I cannot make them wait any longer. He says, I took them as much as I could with my strength. I went to the zari of Sayyid al-Shuhada. I said, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. From that day until this day, whenever I say salam to Sayyid al-Shuhada, I get a jawab, a response. Mujab, sallu ala Muhammad wa Allahu Akbar. Mujab meaning the one who gets a response, the one who gets a jawab. Mujab, Ibrahim al-Mujab, Sayyid Ibrahim al-Mujab. Never forget the name. Ajrukum Allah. It is Shabeer Jum'ah. Just a few moments I'll take. I mentioned parents. We are told the Imam was once asked, Yabna Rasulullah, what is the greatest zina of this dunya? What is the greatest ornament of this dunya? That if Allah gives anyone this gift, it is as if Allah has given them the best ornament, zina of this world. He says, if Allah gives you a son, and you see this son grow up in front of your eyes, and this son is a muttaqi, this child is muttaqi, and they have taqwa and they're a good person, and you see this person walk around in society, and when people see this child, they look at you and they say, what a good child, for example. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, what's the biggest test in life? He says, the biggest test is if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes the same son away from you. Allahu Akbar. One of the biggest calamities of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We're told there's a moment in time in the Bazaar of Sham. In the Bazaar of Sham, they had put all the heads on the spears. All the family of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, they put one head after the other on the spears. In the Bazaar of Sham, there was one lady who was standing in the Bazaar. She was staring at one face, and she was staring only at this face. There was a mother from the family of the Ahlul Bayt. She saw this woman looking at this head. She went towards this woman. She says, oh lady, what are you looking at? She says, I'm looking at this one head. This head, this youth is the most beautiful person I've ever seen in my life. And she says, what are you thinking? She says that I am thinking that I hope and I pray that whoever this young man's mother is, I hope that his mother was not alive to see this day. Layla began to beat herself. She began to cry. She said, don't say that. That's my son Ali al-Akbar. Ajrukum ala Allah. They say on Yawm Ashura, on the day of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein, when he sent Ali al-Akbar, the love of a mother, the love of a father and a son, only a parent who's lost a child can know what difficulty it is.